Hi, so I'm going to do one of those switch it over kind of things here, and I really hope that everyone's seeing my screen. Yes, it says that I'm showing my screen, so I'm gonna go on. Yes, I am going to talk about embedded iPaaS or embedded integration platform as a service, or rather, another word for it might be embedded integration or built-in integration. And most importantly, I think, is what does this mean for the future? Because this is why we're here, kind of, looking into the future and seeing, what's happening. And it kind of touches on what Andreas was talking about earlier, actually. But we hear a lot about, or I have been heard a lot about, that there is more integration going on at enterprises and organizations all over the world. It was said by the San Diego Times that 2020 would be the year of integration. But I'm kind of thinking that it's kind of the wrong kind of integration, or the right kind. It kind of depends on where you are. I mean, if you're an integrator, and want to build stuff in order to integrate stuff, it's already built into the product. That is what the built-in iPaaS is. So you can find your typical invoicing system up there to the right. They say that all our things are already built into the product. You don't need a separate middleware to use our product, which is a good thing as a consumer. Perhaps not for me that likes to do things with integrations. And looking at things like how to ingest, transform, and analyze, which is kind of what everyone that works in analytics today are talking about. They don't view integration at all. They see data sources, and they might see things like how do you transform data, but they do it themselves within kind of what they say their platform. And the way that they have achieved this, and also why there's more and more built-in integration, is because we have kind of now agreed on a couple of standardized communication patterns and formats. CSV files has been there since like forever. We have, of course, XML files, which are still refusing to die, of course. And JSON has been going on for like now 5 to 10 years, right? And going into analytics, where you have a lot of really big files, you're looking at things like Parquet files, which is a kind of personal favorite of mine. You should really go check it out if you don't know what it is. It's quite cool. And we kind of also have agreed that we all now using HTTPS. We're using HTTP with the TLS layer on top of it, and using certificates to talk to one another. That is a very good and secure way of interchanging data between units. But we also, of course, have the old stopgap of SFTP for transferring data from people that don't like using HTTPS or don't know how, actually. You can send large files over HTTPS. Actually, it's as a streaming functionality, which is awesome and also secure. And now moving forward, we then, of course, have this packaged business capability that Andreas was talking about earlier. And when I look at this, I see once again like a unit of information that is protected or handled internally by services, but also exposed using APIs and event channels. And through these APIs and event channels, you can then interconnect different parts of your enterprise. All of these then being, services or servers. Which, I mean, once again, if everything then kind of fits together, what do I do? If I'm an integration developer, hardcore integration developer, is there any, what can I do? I want to keep my job, So is there something? Well, there's this thing about not all integrations, of course. Not all integrations are still HTTPS based and just fits in together with everything. They are alien in some forms. There are, of course, things with strange formats. Typically, things that are evolving around encryptions, for instance, that is, not supported out of the box. And there might be some more archaic communication patterns, of course. SFTP, for instance, is not a standard. There are a lot of different ways of using SFTP. However, HTTP is a standard. And, of course, non-supported or non-standard security patterns, which used to be a thing that you kind of just invented as you went along, whichever worked. SOAP is a very good example of using its version, but still not a good version. If you use, HTTPS and certificates, you're done, you're there, and as it should be. But there are still some things that we can do, of course, as integration developers, as integration architects, is that we can, of course, use architecture. Because, as Andreas was talking about, someone kind of has to decide on what is the best way of doing stuff. Because everyone knows that if you don't have architecture and governance, you end up with a lot of point-to-point integrations. And that might be a good thing, I don't know. But if you don't have governance over it, you will end up looking at a big black hole in your organization. Because if it's not documented, then no one knows what happens if I were to remove one of those neat building blocks. They're still interconnected. They still need to be governed. And you can also become a system specialist. If you are working with things that are considered kind of hardcore integration nowadays, you can work within one of these pods that Gartner has presented us with. So, you could be an expert on CRM systems, on how to connect CRM systems, or a particular set of CRM systems to be able to be a pod in the enterprise way. So that is another way of looking at it. And coming up kind of the end of my thing here on like where the embedded iPaaS thing is moving towards and what it means for us as integrators is that the past will kind of be the future and then back again. I mean, the pendulum is swinging back and forth to society, and this is also true for technology. It used to be that, this thing over here is very good, and then someone find that something else is very good, and then everyone slowly starts to move over there. And in some time in the future, we will then again talk about centralizing everything. I can guarantee it. But this is the thing I'm thinking about now, that it used to be that you had a system or you had a capability, you had information, and that was my information. But then you went out somewhere in the enterprise, or perhaps your like neighbor, and said, well, you also have information I need, but it's your information, and we want to make things work together. So we build an integration and we start exchanging information back and forth. And what then happened is that we do that thing again, and then we do another integration, and things start to go south. Again, we end up with a nest. We end up with the spider's web, call it whatever you want, but it's still point-to-point integrations, not anything centralized. So then we did something where we kind of collected all these integrations within a thing. We kind of call it the ICC or whatever. The IDC was another word for it. And we kind of built a framework around this and governed it and said, okay, now this is how we do it. This is us. But then again, outside of our enterprise, we found SaaS services, and we found you, and we want your information. So we back to my system or my enterprise or my pod of event channels, APIs, and optional interfaces that protects my data in a value stream or whatever you don't want to call it. But it's still, my and then your. And what will happen is that we will start adding more and more and more building blocks, more and more pods, and they will fit together quite nicely. But if we just zoom up a little bit and try to remember what happens if you don't have architecture, what happens if you don't have governance or experts, system specialists, you end up in the end with an enterprise landscape that will probably look just as bad as before, just on a bigger scale. So that's kind of my thoughts today. Good luck out there.